Tonight we have something really good, a hot topic in the news this week's been charged with crime. This is a show where I try to educate real stories. Thank you for watching Truth and Justice with Vivian King. Tonight we have a full panel of 5 lawyers plus me, and we're going to talk about current events. Remember, I said we were going to change our format and start talking about current events once a month to help educate our community about what's going on, allow you to ask questions, and we'll answer your questions. Tonight I have with me Billy Skinner, I have Justin Harris, Victoria Erfesoglou, I can never say this name, forgive me, Damon Parrish, and Equator Turner. And we're going to just talk about 3 interesting topics that have come up in the last few weeks. One, we're going to talk about our own City of Houston Police Chief McClellan, who hit a pedestrian and was sanctioned to be off for 1 day by the mayor. And remember that the police chief reports to the mayor. And we're going to talk about Devin Anderson being appointed to be the new DA, acting DA, to take her husband's place now that Mike Anderson, our Harris County DA, has passed on. And then we're going to talk about the Jonathan Farrell case in North Carolina. He was the young college student that had a 1-car accident, was injured, knocked on a door asking for help, and the homeowner thought he was a burglar, called the police, and when they came out, even though he was unarmed with his arms up, they shot him 10 to 12 times and basically murdered him. But the different twist for North Carolina is that they actually charged the police officer, which is totally unusual here. They investigated it and charged the officer. We're going to talk about those 3 topics and call and weigh in. Give us about 15 minutes, and then you can call in. We're going to take your questions about the topics that we're discussing. First, we're going to talk about Devin Anderson being appointed to the Harris County DA's office as our acting DA. So we're going to have with us my friend and colleague, Billy Skinner, to explain that process to us. So Billy, explain what happened.
Thank you, Ms. King. In a very interesting turn of events, Mike Anderson, who had been the elected district attorney for Harris County, passed away, unfortunately, and in the process, the weeks afterwards, there were a lot of rumors at the courthouse, a lot of talk on the streets, and a lot of scuttlebutt, and in fact, even some news articles about who would replace Mike Anderson. He'd only been in office a short period of time. During that period of time, unfortunately, he had been sick most of it, and so the person that we all believed and no, I guess, Judge Belinda Hill, the first assistant, had basically been the person running the office for a substantial period of time. Judge Hill, obviously very qualified and things of that nature, and I found it very intriguing, to say the least, that Devin Anderson was appointed. When I read through the list of people, and just a list that I found at one of the local websites, Judge Mark Carter, Congressman and former Judge Ted Poe. I never had any idea why Judge Poe would want to come back from Washington to be the DA. A prosecutor, Rachel Palmer, Jim Leichner, a former first assistant, Judge Belinda Hill, and then Devin Anderson. I think the thing that's the most interesting about this is not whether or not Devin Anderson is qualified to be the district attorney. I think by and large she is. She had been a prosecutor, she had been a judge. After she lost the election, she worked as a criminal defense lawyer. I think most of us here know her on some level. That part wasn't particularly of interest to me. Obviously she's qualified. The part that was interesting to me, and I would like to get input from you all here, is the fact that from someone who's an outsider, someone who's not involved in politics, it looks an awful lot like the old concept of passing the torch. And I think for voters, that should be concerning. And particularly if you're a voter and you're not a Republican, that should be something that you're keenly interested in. The fact that the governor appointed someone within the party is not surprising. Who knows what happened behind closed doors, whether Judge Hill wanted the position or did not want the position. But the fact that the elected official's wife became the new district attorney is intriguing. And for me, like I said, the piece that came up the most is that it's the passing of the torch concept that had ruled Harris County in the district attorney's office for decades. And that cycle was somewhat broken by Pat Lykos.
Definitely.
Mike Anderson, reelected, beat out Judge Lykos in the primary. The Democratic Party had their debacle during the election. I think it's the nicest word I can think to say. And then for it to look like the torch is being passed again, I think is intriguing. And I think it has a lot of people in the legal community intrigued. And like I said, it's not that she's not qualified. I believe she's qualified. In fact, I believe she can do a good job.
Right.
But it's intriguing to see the concept of the torch being passed back at the Harris County DA's office.
Let me comment too. One of the things I found interesting when I was sitting at Mike Anderson's funeral, and it was so well attended, it was such a beautiful homegoing, I thought, you know, it'd be interesting if Devin Anderson gets the job, because a lot of times with congressional people and state representatives, if they die, the widows always get those unexpired terms. No one had ever talked about it in the courthouse, in the criminal courthouse. Everybody was talking about, I can't wait until Belinda Hill is appointed. I can't wait until Belinda Hill is appointed. I have 2 capital murders pending, and the DA, the elected DA, has to make the final decision with his committee on whether he's going to seek death or not. And I've been waiting all year for that decision, and Mike Anderson wasn't available to make that decision. So we've been on hold. In fact, I have to go to court on one of those cases in the morning because it was thought that Belinda Hill would have been appointed by tomorrow to make that decision. And now, I don't know if Devin, I mean, since Belinda has been there the whole time, she might have even seen the file already. You see what I'm saying? Because they've been waiting for him to be a part of the group, and I gave them a packet about in May as an offer, like a big old packet of mitigation, because he has a lot of mental health issues, and I don't want them to seek death, so I gave him a mitigation package and a plea bargain offer also for like 40 years. And so no one's been able to give me an answer on that. And so everybody, including that case is in the 338th, which is Judge Brock Thomas, and the prosecutor is John Jordan. And they've been thinking that we were going to make this decision tomorrow. So it might be reset one more time. And this case has been going on for about 3 years. But so anyway, I just thought that was just interesting. But I did think that when I was sitting there, I was like, you know, she is qualified. You know, like you said, Billy, she's very qualified. But I thought maybe she might want to be at home with those beautiful children who've lost their father, and, you know, their lives have been turned upside down. And so, but I do know she's still a young woman who wants a career, because I don't think she's even 50. So.
And I admire her for taking the position. I just found it interesting of the torch passing concept. I also find it interesting that you say that it's in the 338th District Court, where you have a capital murder pending in front of a judge who not so long ago was the law partner of the now district attorney.
I hadn't thought about that. That's going to be very interesting. One of the things the citizens and the viewers need to think about is keep up with who the people are, because when you have a former prosecutor that was a long-time prosecutor come back to be the DA's office, then the same old thing's going to always exist. The nepotism is going to exist. Everybody's married to each other. Everybody looks out for their friends' cases. We need to make sure that there's fairness across the board. And I think one of the things people were looking forward to if Belinda Hill was appointed is that she would administer justice equally across the board. I think that's what, I thought she would be a little unforgiving, you know, and I like her, I love her. I thought she'd be a little unforgiving, but I thought she'd be unforgiving to everybody. You know what I'm saying?
Equally unforgiving.
Equally unforgiving, which you can admire. You can handle that. You got your fight on your hands, but you don't want to go back to the old system where it's nepotism and certain people get deals, certain people's cases get no billed because they were friends with the DA or friends with the judge or friends with this or married to the DA. You don't really want that to go on, and not that I believe Devin would do that intentionally, but I just think that there was, while she was in the DA's office, which I was in the DA's office for part of that time also, there was a lot of nepotism and a lot of favorites being played. And they're still played now, actually. But that was one of the things that if Belinda became DA, I was going to talk to her about.
Vivian, there's one thing I want to say. I don't think this is a symbolic move on the governor's part in appointing Devin Anderson. If you read it, it's all about politics. They want to keep the Republican Party in office. They want to keep it moving. And to do so, they couch it under, well, let's get Mike Anderson's wife there. We can couch this under as symbolic. She'll carry the flame, she'll move things going. But I don't think that's the case at all. I really do think this is just about politics. It's just about keeping the Republican Party there, keeping that regime going, and whatever existed or would have existed with Mike Anderson, we know now will stay with Devin Anderson.
Okay, what do you think about that, Justin?
Well, I was going to ask Damon, actually, do you think that part of the reason why is because of any future political aspirations that she may have? When you say maintaining the Republican agenda and the Republican, House.
I think it's, personally, you can't seek the highest office in the criminal justice system in Harris County without it being in some ways political.
Okay.
I don't see that existing. If it wasn't, then it would have gone to maybe a Belinda Hill or maybe even a Democrat. I think Devin, and God bless her if she wants to go further in office, she can, but I think this was about politics.
Okay.
Pure and simple.
And Rick Perry made that decision, right?
Yeah, the governor has to do that. So Equator Turner, let's bring you in. What are your thoughts on this topic? You didn't know Devin when she was a prosecutor, did you?
Yes, I knew her when she was a prosecutor. And
did you ever have cases against her?
No, I didn't. I knew
you were a baby lawyer then, though, right?
Baby lawyer. And I was a baby lawyer also when she was on the bench.
Okay.
What was she, in the 177th?
177.
Yes, and I remember her.
Defeated when Obama won the first time.
Yes, she was. I really, truly think, I actually spoke with someone who is a dead heart Republican. I called him up and I texted him up and I'm like, hey, why didn't Belinda get this job? I'm ready to protest in front of the courthouse on Tuesday. I was going to have a couple of my friends out there from MBUF, a couple of, other people. And I'm like, they didn't pass that on to Belinda. Belinda was first assistant. She was well qualified. However, I really honestly think Belinda just didn't want the job. But as far as the governor appointing Devin Anderson, like Damon said, I really think it was a political choice. And it was not necessarily a choice as to who would do the best for the people. It was a political choice of who would be the best for the Republican Party.
I agree with you on that. I don't think that the governor ever thinks about who would be
the best for the Republican Party.
It's always who would be the best for the Republican Party, but that is politics. And somehow we have to blend and marry politics with the people who actually represent us and the people who that we elect, and somehow we want to educate people on the best way to do that. Well, does anyone else have any comments about this?
I just have one other thing.
Sorry.
The thing of it is that the district attorney's office or the district attorney of Harris County is supposed to be about the people. It's not supposed to be about who is best for the Republican Party. They take an oath for the people. The district attorney's office is supposed to prosecute for victims, to prosecute for the people of Harris County. And if the person who's elected there or who they put in there is about politics, then are we really doing a disjustice to everybody out there, the every average day Jane and Joe? How are we protecting them?
I agree, and when you take an oath to be an assistant district attorney, you raise your hand, and I know some of us have done it, and you swear that you'll seek justice.
Yes.
And I don't doubt that Devin Anderson will do that. In fact, I think she will. However, the fact that someone who was voted off the bench by the people circles back around and gets appointed, I think that's hard for everyday people to understand. We get it because we all live in the courthouse. But for the voters out there, what this says to you is go vote in November and understand that if you're a Democrat and you have a governor in Austin that's a Democrat, then like you said, Damon, a Democrat gets appointed.
Right.
And when you think those races may not impact you, or, you know what, I'm just one citizen in Houston, what am I going to be able to do to impact the entire state? Well, what you do is you go and you vote.
Right.
And this is the trickle down, and Damon made an excellent point. This is the trickle down of politics and criminal justice. And we all need to be more aware when we decide, whatever party you're in, whomever you support, who we put in those places.
Exactly.
I agree. And one of the things I'll promise to my viewers is that I will keep you informed. So we will be watching Devin. We pray that she does an excellent job. She's very smart. She's been a prosecutor, judge, and defense lawyer, so she definitely has the tools to be an excellent leader. And I just pray that she creates sensible policies so that things are fair. Because I think right now we just have too many cases that are bullcorn. And although all of us make our living on these bullcorn cases, and I want us all to just keep doing that, when you just see all these crack rock cases and these little bitty cases, and they're just filling up this system, it's just crazy, because you just know that, you know, what's a rock in a car that you have to scrape up off of a carpet in a car? I mean, it's just so stupid. And one of the policies, and I liked Mike Anderson a lot, but I hated the fact that he went back to taking those under a gram cases, those residue cases again, those trace cases.
And that was, again, a political move.
Yeah, that's how he beat out Lycos in the primary. So is Devin going to have to still do the same thing, because she's keeping his legacy?
Well, she's following in his vision, right? So it sounds like that's what's going to happen.
I will say this, having appeared before and having seen her in action as a defense attorney, she's definitely a woman who has her own thoughts. And while she may be there to carry on the legacy, I wouldn't expect her to be a puppet. There may be some surprises that happen over the next, I guess, year. I guess they've run for re-election in 2014. I think it'll be interesting to see how she fills that role, and to see if she is, quote unquote, beholden to those people who said, hey, if you want this group of people to support you, you're going to have to start taking these crack pipe cases. I think it's going to be very
interesting. And I think that she has the youth, the maturity, and everything to get it without nonsensical policies. Because to me, the residue cases are nonsensical. It makes no sense. It's trash, okay? It's just trash. It's like an extra Coke in a can you throw away. It's just trash. And so I think that she's smart enough to still sell to her party that she's tough on crime without arresting basically homeless people that really have no evidence, that have no power, no stroke, that we can just put our foot on their necks. I mean, because it's just not a fair system when we have the dope house somewhere that probably has 10 kilos, and all we're doing is getting some bullcorn that's being, crack pipe that's being thrown around. But we're not really trying to do real policing and making these officers go out and do things that need to be done.
And I just want to say, personally, I don't think there's much for her, Devin Anderson, to carry on, because Mike didn't really do much. And unfortunately, due to his circumstance, he was in and out real fast. And so while he was there, all we really saw was the end of the divert program, as that way was it was created by Lycos, and now the trace cases are back. But we really didn't see much.
That's a big deal. Those trace cases are big, though.
But we didn't see much policy else as far as what else he may have had in mind. And so
agree.
Another reason why I say it's political is that there's not much for her to carry on other than no more divert, and now we have trace. So we have two policies that she might keep moving forward, and then the rest of it will be her own show.
You know, I see what you're saying there. I disagree to one extent, that I think that it creates more of a problem when you have that vacuum of leadership that Mike left, and when he had to take some time for his health. And I know Judge Hill did everything she possibly could to fill in that, and I think she did a fantastic job. But there were several months, we spoke of the divert program, when the district attorney's office was trying to transition to something new, and none of the DAs in the individual courts, the assistant district attorneys, knew what to do.
Yeah.
And none of them wanted to take a stand. And now we have this whole new personality of leadership that they have to scurry around and worry about doing what ultimately is the right thing in most cases, because they don't know how their new boss is going to react.
They don't want to get fired, so now we're going to have a standstill. And when we deal with the citizens, the people we represent, and we go to court, you're going to be expecting something to happen. Nothing's going to be happening, because they're going to be dealing with policy changes. And so it's going to be reset, and God knows, a lot of times I hear regular citizens blame lawyers for resets. We want to get our money and get out. And I tell my clients a lot of times, do you want to work for the same money for a year? No. We're doing this because we have to. We're not doing it because we want to. We're trying to look out for your best interest, and sometimes the decision makers just aren't there. Right. But it's hard to explain that to citizens because they have to take off work to be there no matter what, which is something I campaigned against last time. I wanted a scheduling order similar to federal court, and I think they're trying to do something like that now because it's just too many people coming to court for nothing.
That's true.
Just come to court when there's pretrial conference and trial, or if they're going to plead, and we can set that. But just to keep coming every 2 or 3 weeks is stupid. It's just a waste of time and resources, and county resources. Well, we've talked about Devin, and if we want to add anything else, we can. Let's switch topics now. Let's have Justin Harris tell us about, update us about Chief McClellan. Tell us what happened with him hitting this pedestrian.
Well, thanks, Ms. King. Back on September 4th, Chief McClellan from the Houston Police Department was on his way to work. He was turning, I believe he was making a left-hand turn from Clay onto Travis, an intersection that I'm sure a lot of us here at this table drive through frequently. And in his words, he was, I had a green light, and the pedestrian had a green light to walk across the street, and he said for whatever reason he didn't see him. He pulled through the intersection, and the man flew about 6 to 10 feet. Witnesses said that he fell down, did not get up, could not get up, was in great pain. The man's name was actually James Harris, and no relation.
Wow.
And he's a broken arm. He's an attorney in Houston and has been out of work for a little while.
Wow.
So, you know, he was, as you said earlier, Mayor Parker is Chief McClellan's boss. Ultimately, he works at her pleasure, and she suspended him. She decided that an appropriate punishment for him was a 1-day suspension. So, and I cannot find, and somebody else may know whether that was paid or unpaid, but he got a vacation day, which I haven't had in a while.
I don't know if it was or not. And one of the comments that I told Justin off air was I was a hearing examiner for the city of Houston, and that's when they're complaining about punishment. It's when their bosses sanction them. They go through one grievance process, they lose, the boss sanctions them again, they go through another grievance process, and now they go to an arbitrator like I was, which is the hearing examiner between the police lawyers and the person who's been aggrieved, that's a police officer. And one of the things that they would do a lot, and I discovered, was that the city is self-insured. So I used to always wonder when I'm in my lawyer capacity, criminal lawyer capacity, why when an officer hits somebody, they always blame the other person. And I found out when I was a hearing examiner is because they actually get written up if they have an accident and they cause the accident. And to me, that was, teaching officers to lie. I think that seemed like the fundamentals of teaching them to start lying on people. And we want honest police officers. So now, to me, we have a city policy that leans toward liars. Because if the city is going to punish you for saying I made a mistake or I had an accident, which, you know, I mean,
you're not going to do it.
You're not going to do it. You're going to blame the other person because you don't want to get written up. This is your livelihood. And statistics always show that a person who's in a car all the time for a living are going to have more accidents than the average person because they spend more hours in a car. So officers are going to have accidents, and I just think that if they're good police officers and they have an accident and the city's self-insured, then it should just be like anything else in life. We don't get written up on our jobs because we have an accident. It doesn't affect our livelihood because it's encouraging lies, and I always hated that. And so they get sanctioned. So that's why the mayor had to sanction him.
Well, and what you said is a good point as far as, you know, the initial statement, because initially, and I don't have it in front of me, but initially Chief McClellan said something along the lines of, I was at a stop, the light turned green, I checked the intersection, it was clear, I made my turn, and this man just appeared in front of him. But a few days ago, surveillance cameras from that intersection came out and showed that's not right. This man he was well into the intersection when Chief McClellan went forward, and he struck him pretty well. And my take on this is not so much what happened to him, but what didn't happen to him, and what happens to our clients so often. He gets to get off with a 1-day suspension and getting to say, for whatever reason, I didn't see him. But however many of us have gone to prosecutors and tried to explain that, and we've just been met with complete skepticism, or that we're lying, or that our clients are lying. They just don't believe us, period. But you know, it doesn't matter whether our client's an upstanding citizen like Chief McClellan or not so much.
Right.
He gets the benefit of the doubt, and our clients
that's a
don't
great point. ABC 13 reported that it was unpaid for whatever that's worth. But something that we talk about
he also
often.
agreed to take defensive driving.
Yeah, he's taking
wow.
defensive driving.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you think they searched his car?
No.
Ha! Oh, Billy, oh, wow, that's the best comment. Do you think,
Yes.
do you think somebody stopped and searched his car?
No.
Did he stop and render aid? I'm sure he did.
Yeah.
But did they search his car? Did they tell him his car smelled like marijuana?
No.
He's
Did
a
he do
black
field
male.
sobriety
Did they,
tests?
yeah, yeah.
Or, you know,
Vivian, I had a question for you. Since you had the experience, is it policy for officers in an accident to have to get tested for drugs, alcohol? Or
I believe that
policy
it
for
is.
that?
Yeah, I think they are. I think they are. But that's interesting you said that because I don't ever remember that coming up in the debate. Usually the debate is that the person doesn't want that disciplinary action in their record. So that's usually the issue. They never complained about, you know, taking a drug test.
Okay.
So I don't remember if that's their policy because I wasn't dealing with policy. It's like an appeal. They are appealing to me saying, I want this removed because I told the truth, and they're saying, no, this is our policy. Right. And what I would usually do, because I liked it when officers told the truth, I would usually just say, leave it in this personnel file for a year, and if no other infraction like that comes up, remove it. Because that hurts them from being promoted.
right.
And I'll tell you, the video that I saw online was much more egregious than what I had read.
Yeah.
When you take a look at that video, this guy is in almost the center of the crosswalk, and he gets popped. If the police chief had come to a complete stop, he accelerated really quickly.
He did.
Prior to hitting.
Well, you see him when the video starts. He is at a dead stop, so he really goes. And you know, we talked about it. I think you said it, Ms. King, beforehand. He was probably on his cell phone. You know.
Yeah, he was probably on his cell phone, like so
all
many
of us
people
do.
are downtown on their way to work on our cell
Right.
phones, wasn't paying attention, and caused an accident. And the thing is, though, when other people, like you said, private citizens have accidents, then they either get arrested. If they're a black male, they're going to be told to get out of their car. They're going to search their phones.
Absolutely.
Or they're going to ask, can I search your ar? You know, I mean, I bet they didn't do that to Chief McClellan.
No.
I see we have a call. Caller, you're on.
They're not going to do all that, Vivian. The thing about it, this guy was way in the middle of the intersection when this guy hit him. And he was definitely on his phone. You can believe that. And another thing about it, we're not going to hear about the city. Our taxpayers' money going to pay all his medical bills,
Yeah.
and plus probably get $200,000 or $300,000 to cover. And we'll never hear about that.
Oh, yeah, because there's a settlement because we're self-insured. The city of Houston has no insurance. So it's going to come out of our tax dollars.
If they wouldn't have had that camera, we would never know the truth.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
That's absolutely true.
You know, and he was on his phone. I goes right there all the time. I go over to the law office to get the tax sheets, and they run that light all the time. You know, I guarantee he was on that phone, but I guarantee we would never hear about the settlement because we're gonna have to pay for that.
Well, I can tell you this. We're trying to have a week, once a month, I'm going to have a panel discussion. So I'm going to write down, we're going to follow up and find out what happens. It'll probably be a year from now. But, you know, because it takes a long time. They'll fight him. They're going to fight him. Like you said, the city attorney is the person that's going to be fighting against any claims.
That's a lost cause there.
Right.
He got 1 day suspension and he lose $900 for that 1 day.
Right.
That might cover the settlement, right?
No.
That
I
one money
doubt
the
it.
city saves? No?
I doubt it. Do you have any comments on the Devin Anderson appointment, the widow of Mike Anderson?
I really, it's politics. You know, she, like you were saying about the crack pipes and stuff like that. Is nonsense. It's trash. Like a Coke can is, you know, just throw out the window. If they were getting in the community and do a little more, instead of arresting these guys for DWI, you know, public protection or whatever in the community, that's trash. That's a waste of.
That's just a waste of time.
Taxpayers' money.
Just think of how much money it costs. Just think how much money it costs for a police officer to arrest someone, get off the street for the night, make a police report, take up a bed at the county, come to court, get a court-appointed lawyer because those people don't have any money, and it probably costs $50,000.
Yeah, here's the thing. A lot of those police, when they arrest those guys like that, they ready to go in and do paperwork and be done with their shift the rest of the night.
Right.
Right.
True.
You know, that's just the bottom line of that. They know who those guys is. They know what they do every day. They see them every day on the corners.
Right.
They know what they do.
Exactly.
So when they get ready to end their shift or want to go and job off, hey, well, I'm gonna go pick up Joe. I'm
Right.
gonna pick up Charlie.
Right.
You know, give him a crack pipe. I know he got a pipe or whatever. And then you're in the system, going to court every day or whatever. Calling out the courtroom, you know, having to hire attorney that they can't pay for. They can't pay for. They got a peel
right.
a crack. They can't pay for you.
They can't pay for me. They sure can't pay for me. You're right about that. Thank you for calling, and please call me back if you have another comment. We're going to also talk about one other topic tonight, but thank you for calling.
Well, I got a client that's going to call you from Dallas or something.
Who is this? Who is this? Who are you?
This Joe Ballard.
Okay, nice to talk to you, Joe.
Yeah, I'm gonna wait for your number at the end of the screen.
Okay, or Google me, Vivian R. King. You can always Google me.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
And if we don't have another call holding at this moment, we're going to turn our attention to Victoria, who's going to tell us about the Jonathan Ferrell case out of North Carolina.
Yes, thank you, Ms. King, for having me on your show.
Sure.
Jonathan Ferrell was a 24-year-old African-American male. He played football in Florida for University, A&M University, and he was in the process of moving to North Carolina. He was going to be married very soon. And Jonathan got in an accident, a car accident, earlier this month, and his car was damaged. He had to kick his way out of the window, out of his car. There was some reports, some speculation as to whether he had been possibly drinking before the accident, but no one else was injured in the crash. He started canvassing a nearby neighborhood to ask for help. He ends up knocking on the door of a house, and a Caucasian woman, opens the door. She initially thought it would be her husband, and when she realized it wasn't her husband, she slammed the door and called 911. If you listen to the 911 call, it's about 17 minutes long, and it took the police officers about 11 minutes to get to the scene. She's obviously upset and scared, I think probably rightfully so, not knowing exactly what's going on or what Jonathan's doing there. She's talking about trying to find her husband's gun. There's an alarm going off. There's dogs barking. In any event, the police arrive, and there are 3 officers, and one of those officers was named Officer Carrick, 27-year-old Caucasian male. And there seems to be some span of time between when they get there and when they actually encounter Jonathan, because you can hear her saying on the phone, they're leaving, the officers are leaving, where are they going? And the operator is telling her, I'm sure they just see Jonathan, they're going to go find him. And long story short, Officer Carrick ends up shooting Jonathan 12 times. He fires 12 bullets. 10 of the bullets entered Jonathan's body. Jonathan was unarmed. I'd argue he may have been disoriented from his car accident.
And having to kick himself out of the car.
Exactly.
He couldn't get out.
One of the officers mentioned that he may have gone for his taser, but in any event, they didn't tase him. They shot him, and they killed him. And now the police officer has been charged with voluntary manslaughter. And the 2 other officers are not on active duty right now. That's the last that I read about it. I don't know if that will change, but it was just the one officer, Officer Carrick, that shot him. And, you know, it'll be interesting to see what happens with that. And I don't mean to compare tragedies, but I think it's helpful to look at just a couple other examples real quickly that have happened in just the last couple of years. One is from the state of California in 2009. A young man named Oscar Grant was shot at the Fruitvale BART station by a police officer. It was New Year's Day in the early morning hours, and there were 3 police officers involved. There were many African-American young males, I'd say about 4 or 5, their friends. They were detained and cuffed and on the ground sitting. The officers at one point restrained Oscar's hands behind his back and had him on his knees. They then, and there's video of this online. It's very clearly videotaped. There were multiple cell phones out by bystanders because it's a train station. And one of the officers named Meserly pulled out his gun and shot Oscar Grant in the back.
Wow.
The Alameda District Attorney's Office charged Officer Meserly with murder, which is interesting because Jonathan in North Carolina, the officer there was not charged with murder, and there have been many commentators that have said that he should have been. In any event, you know, we have a little bit of hindsight with Oscar Grant's case because it did go to trial. Officer Meserly testified that he thought he was he went for his taser and he thought he had his taser out, but it was his weapon that fired and killed Oscar Grant. He died in the hospital the next morning. He was found guilty of involuntary manslaughter, served 2 years in the Los Angeles County Jail in a private cell, and has since been released. So, you know, I bring
And they've made a
that-
movie out of that. I've never seen it, but I've heard about it.
I haven't seen it.
There's a movie called Fruitvale Station, and it's about that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's supposed to be one of those sleepers that might even be an Oscar nomination. I've never seen it because it was at small venues. But what is the third? We have a call. I'm scared to take it. Let's take this call right quick, and then you'll tell us about the other comparison,
Yes,
okay? Caller, you're on.
Oh, Miss King.
Hey, Tracy.
Okay, it's like the phone. You know, I some feedback. I got my TV already turned down.
Okay, you turned the TV down? Okay.
My TV turned down, but I still hear the feedback.
I know, I hear the
That's fine.
feedback too. Renita, see if you can do something about that, because I hear the reverberation. Turn it down a little bit. Okay, come on. Okay, it's okay.
Okay. Is anything better now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay.
We can hear you.
We can hear you.
You're very loud to us. It's just kind of muffled, but go ahead.
Okay. I want to talk to you about what we're talking about. The situation with the North Carolina situation.
Okay.
And I think that it's very unfortunate.
I agree with you, Tracy. That's awful. That could be. I have a daughter I just sent to college. I would be devastated if she had an accident and somebody killed her and the police killed her. I would be devastated. So, I mean, all I can do is just weep for that family. They were sending him to college. He was doing everything right.
Yeah, it's all like Trayvon Martin revisited.
It's just a shame that we're so afraid of black boys, and I'm like Victoria. I can understand if I open the door and it's not my husband and it's a teenage boy at the front door, black boy, white boy, doesn't matter. If he's a teenage boy, I'm going to be scared and I'm going to close the door and I'm going to call the police. But I would never want the police to kill him. I mean, I wouldn't even say it's a burglar. I would just say it's some identified man at my door, or I might even close the door and ask the kid, "Can I help you?" But I'm not even sure I would call the police. I'm just telling you the truth. I think I would probably. I mean, if he didn't look like he had a gun or was trying to bust in when I opened the door, I think that I would just think that it was just somebody knocking on the door.
Yeah.
That's what I think I would do.
And I have done that.
But being so big and bulky, you're a football player. I just, I turn TV off and I still hear it. But anyway, by being so big and bulky, you know, the police officer might feel threatened. He might feel threatened.
What time of day or night was it? Do we know?
It was nighttime.
It was
2:30 in the
nighttime.
morning.
So it's
Yeah.
2:30 in the morning. So that's scary. I mean, because women think we're going to get raped or whatever.
But that's why you call the police. You call
Right.
the police for cooler, calmer heads who are trained professionals to come out and find out what's really going on.
And
Exactly.
deal with
So
it.
you don't have to go out there with a gun and do something wrong.
Right.
So we depend on, and that's what happens when you arm a
Justin, that
27-year-old.
is so smart. I mean, because if we go out there with a gun, we're going to shoot them. I mean, if you're a homeowner because you're scared. So, like you said, you expect your police to be able to
Right.
do that.
And that's why they have tasers. I mean, that's one of the reasons that police officers carry tasers. And I've actually seen someone tased at the courthouse in person.
Wow.
And I can tell you, it will knock them to the ground and they will flail. This is one of those situations where I think, again, we see the police overusing force.
Plus, I bet that officer can't even articulate why he was scary to them.
Yeah.
You know, they didn't wait to investigate to see. They could have waited. Officers, to my knowledge, still have bullhorns. Even if it's dark and he's a dark-skinned man, they could still be saying, "Show me your hands. Is there an emergency?"
Right.
You know, because they still are in a car with guns, so they have the jump on them. Most people just don't start shooting at cops.
Right.
They usually run, if anything.
Well, and they shot 10 times?
I'm sorry. Coming out on the, you know, the district attorney, you know,
Okay.
Well, I hate to even go there, but I think Belinda Hill was doing an excellent job. And, I guess like I say, just pass the torch.
And it's politics. And it's politics, and we've allowed our legislators to create a system of politics. And so we all have to learn politics. I mean, as us working in the criminal justice system, we've learned politics. I mean, we wanted to be lawyers. We didn't want to be politicians. But we've learned that politics rules, and it really doesn't matter if you're a good lawyer, bad lawyer, good leader, not a good leader, good administrator, good manager. That doesn't matter. It's who is popular in a party. And we have legislators who've created a system of election based on party. And some states aren't like that. I mean, we don't have to be that way. Again, that's why we need to be engaged and involved, and maybe the next group of young legislators can change that. But we can certainly vote.
I'm going to hang up. I'm going to watch the rest of the show because I missed on some. I'm recording, but I had to step aside to, make sure I hear all of it.
Okay, Tracy.
Okay.
Thank you.
Nice talking to you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay. All righty. So, Victoria, tell us, you gave us the comparison to Oscar Grant in California at Fruitvale Station, who was just murdered. Because I based on the way you educated us about it, if he was handcuffed and on the ground or had his hands behind his back, I just don't understand why he had to be shot at all.
Right.
And a lot of times what I find police officers do is they play with people with those tasers.
Yeah.
A lot of times they tase people that don't need to be tased.
Absolutely.
And what bothers me is if I'm in a stressful situation, and I know I'm not a trained policeman or I don't know how to work a gun, but I mean, how do you don't know if you're going for your taser or your gun? That's what scares me is that.
That's
it's
absolutely
and that's what the experts at the trial said. Like, you can't confuse those two. And if you watch the video of him, he is like prone on the ground with his hands behind him. There's several cops, and the officer who's above him is just kind of kneeling on his back, and he just pulls his gun out and pop.
But why'd he do it?
You can't see struggling or anything. It's just
murder.
Well, there's never an excuse for that.
no, there's
Ever.
not.
Let's take another call. Caller, you're on. Thank you for calling. Truth and Justice with Vivian King.
Sorry, Victoria.
No call. Okay. They hung up. All right. Thank you, Victoria. What's the next one?
The last thing I'd like to say about the Oscar Grant case is because we were talking about training and, well, why did he do it? And there's actually the federal government, the Department of Justice, has opened an investigation, a civil rights investigation. There's no charges have been filed as of now. But I think it's interesting that we have sort of this overseeing by the federal government of it, like, hey, what is going on with this training and these officers? And the third example I had was a gentleman named Kenneth Chamberlain out of White Plains, New York, also an African-American male. This time he wasn't quite as young, though. He's 68 years old.
Wow.
Vietnam veteran. And he's in his apartment. His niece lives upstairs on the 5th floor. He's asleep at night. It's in the middle of the night, 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. I can't remember exactly what time. And he activates his medical life alert. His son had gotten him, the family had gotten him a little life alert in case he had issues because he had a heart condition. At some point during the night, they think that maybe he rolled over in his sleep. He activates it, and when he activated it, there's a little call box that links to the company that provides assistance. And it basically is a big speakerphone, and they ask him, is he all right? Does he need help? They don't get a response, so they immediately call the authorities, but they call the authorities and ask for medical help.
Like 911.
Exactly.
Yes.
They call 911 and say, you need to go to this address, medical attention is required. So the police officers knew that they were going there for a medical emergency. The officers arrive. By this time, Kenneth Chamberlain is awake and alert, on foot in his apartment. He's speaking to the company through the speakerphone system and telling them, I'm all right, I don't need help, please leave me alone, I'm okay. The officers won't leave. They keep urging him to open the door so that presumably, and they keep saying, they can see that he's all right. He cracks the door at one point, and interestingly enough, all these cases, there's video. So there is a video of Kenneth Chamberlain cracking open the door. And before the video surfaced, the local newspapers said that he was attacking the officers with a machete or a butcher knife.
Oh, my God.
And the man, he opened his door. The officers can see him clearly that he's standing, but they don't leave. They ultimately take his door off of the hinges.
Wow.
There are racial epithets that the officers use. They're all Caucasian. I can't tell you how many officers were there because in the video it looks like a lot came. They get into the apartment. They give no verbal commands. You don't hear anything like, hey, get on the ground, put your hands up, none of that. They tase him. It appears that one of the electrodes from the taser doesn't, connect onto his body, so there are reports that they then shoot him with a rifle with beanbag bullets. And ultimately, an officer pulls out his firearm and shoots Kenneth Chamberlain to death.
Wow.
In his
how old?
apartment. 68 years old.
Can you believe that they murdered an old man like
They
this?
tased
At
him.
home.
They shot him with a
In his
beanbag,
own home.
and they shot and killed him. That is.
And where's the medical attention? I mean, it doesn't even seem like the officer should be there. It seems like it should be 911. I mean, it should be the EMS and finding out there's nothing wrong and saying, okay, thank you, and leaving.
Absolutely. And his niece, who lived upstairs, by this time had come down, but they completely disregarded her. You would think with some training and some education, they would try to ascertain his medical condition before shooting him. And so I thought this was a good example for Jonathan Ferrell because a man who's just been in an accident, we kind of talked about this earlier, with training, with education, with confidence and emotional stability, you would think the officers would try to ascertain his condition.
Well, the right kind
and
of
he's
training.
unarmed.
It's the right kind of training because they get trained. It's just kind of like we were saying with the passing of the torch. They get trained by an older officer who was trained by an older officer who was trained by an older officer, and this torch of bad habits gets passed down, and we need more good officers who are passing down good training.
And what we need to do, since we're city, we fund cities and counties as citizens, we need to demand that they fire people with bad judgment because we cannot afford for another person to get murdered. So I want these people to have murder charges, but if they don't want to do that, then they should fire them. I mean, every other job, there's accountability.
Right.
And if you don't follow the rules and if you use bad judgment, you get fired. And the ultimate sacrifice in someone is to be murdered.
Right.
And you're a taxpayer citizen. This man is 68. He's paid his taxes for at least 65 years. And now you get murdered by these people. And that's what we need to deal with. And we don't have much time in Equator. We haven't had you to say very much. So join in, please.
The thing about these three examples, Mr. Chamberlain is the most, I think, egregious out of them all. He's 68 years old. He's in his own house. He served his country, as she has said. I mean, he's went to Vietnam. Everyone knows that Vietnam, we never should have been over there in the first place.
And it messed up all our young men because they gave them drugs when they went there. So they all came back on dope.
Everybody came back on dope. They sprayed Agent Orange, so they were sick. I mean, he's in his own apartment. I thought that a man, as the Constitution says, has a right in his own castle, not to have police intrusion.
And there's no emergency like someone's intruding on him. That's what's so egregious to me. I agree with you, Equator. I mean, no one's saying that he was harmed or someone was there to harm him. They're messing with a man in his own house.
In his own home, in his own castle. You know, the Constitution is supposed to protect a man in his castle. Everyone in here wants to be protected in their home. They don't want unauthorized police intrusion on their home. The Fourth Amendment says that we have a protection in our home. Mr. Chamberlain, whether it's his apartment, whether it's anything, is in his home. He had a medical problem, as the 911 call says. But for them to come in, to tase him, to shoot him with beanbags, and to eventually shoot and take his life over, even if he was incooperating.
Right.
He's in his house.
Get out of my house. I hate y'all. I don't need y'all.
He's in his
You don't have
house.
a right to shoot someone or to use violence. And I think at a minimum, whenever these officers do that, our officials should have the maturity and the wisdom and the courage to fire these people. I mean, I just think it's enough jobs to go around, and this ain't the job for you. I mean, we don't want people like that to use bad decisions.
Right, and to add insult to injury, in Kenneth Chamberlain's case, it was months before the district attorney's office or the police would release the officers' names. So those people continued on active duty in the streets.
So they
with
continued
what
to
training,
serve.
there was no grand jury indictment for a
So,
long time.
and we know police officers, they were probably sitting around laughing at what they did and being just real nasty about it. Let me ask you this. Was anyone charged in this case?
You know, this
Based on your
case was
research.
from November 2012, and the last that I had seen, there were several attorneys working on the case. There was a civil suit in place, and the grand jury had not indicted.
And what about the video? How did that surface?
Yeah.
It was video. Apparently, the White Plains, the police in White Plains, New York, they have some kind of video mechanism attached to the taser. So whenever you pull out a taser, it starts recording.
Wow.
So that's how they were able to get the video footage from, and it was you know, completely lucky that they did, because all of the reports up to the time the video were released were completely in contradiction. They were calling Mr. Chamberlain mentally unstable, that he attacked police, that he was yielding a machete. I mean, it was very interesting to see the lengths at which they had doctored the story, and then to see the video.
Well, you know, Vivian, one of the things I think we've talked about as a training, this is the training they are receiving. It's the militarization of police.
Right.
It's the war on drugs. It's the war on crime. It's the fact that when a soldier goes to war, we tell them, do what you have to do to go home, to come home.
Right.
You know, what you got to do to come home, you got to do to come home. We're not going to judge you for that. Just come home. And so we train our officers, hey, you're out there on the street, it's you against them. It's you against them, and you're fighting for us, you're at war. And so we create in them an idea, a mentality that they have to be a soldier and do what soldiers do. As opposed to a police officer, which is more of a protect and serve, which is more of a listen and gathering and come to force last, and a soldier come to force first. You know, we're not training them to be that way. I think when you have officers equipped with multiple guns and multiple tasers and shotguns, and you give them a utility belt with nothing but weapons, they're gonna use it. You know, you spend all your time teaching them how to effect arrest and how to use these weapons, and not necessarily how to take the other approach, which is listen, care, stop, use your reasoning. You just teach them how to fight and defend yourself, then this is what you get. So
That's
I
a
think
very
they are
good
getting the
point.
training.
That's a
that
very
they're-
good point,
that they're-
Damon.
they're-
That's a
they're
very good
wanting.
point. I hate that it's like that too, because in Mr. Chamberlain's case, at a minimum, they know it's a medical emergency.
Right.
There is no 911 call that says that there's an intruder, that there's a gun, that there's a weapon. So they should come more as an emergency response team. What do you think, Billy?
Absolutely. I agree with Damon, too. I think we can talk about the weapons and all that all we want, but let's talk about the mentality that they have.
Right.
But the weapons
Yes.
add to that, don't you think?
Right, of
When you
course
get
it does.
grenades and armored vehicles and helicopters and drones, you start sounding more like the United States Army and the Marines than, you know, the Protect and Serve Community Law Enforcement Agency. You know, I know we don't live in Mayberry, but you've got Andy Griffin, who didn't carry a gun, and you got Barney Fife, who was armed to the teeth at that time. And look, that's a bad example because it's not real. But when you give cops a bunch of things they want to go play with,
Right,
you know?
it's true.
You know,
And-
it's interesting because excessive force and aggression by authority is not unique to the United States. There are
Right.
examples of officers using excessive and deadly force globally. But I think the reason I picked these three examples is because there is something unique going on here, unique to the United States, and I think that's the issue of race.
Yes.
Because in all three of these examples, you have Caucasian officers and African American victims who, and they're all male. I think so. Gender is clearly playing a role as well. But I think that's unique to the United States. And I think that when we're talking about weapons and when we're talking about training, to me, and this is just my personal opinion, there's one common denominator in these examples, and it's fear, ignorance, and lack of training, because you're either afraid or you don't understand the situation that's happening when you use that kind of force.
Right.
And my question is, why are we putting people on the street with these kinds of weapons that are afraid and or cannot have the skills to ascertain in an educated way what is going on? And that, I think, is a problem, and I think it's happening in many states.
And it goes back to, like you've said, all along, we vote for our sheriff and we vote for our mayor who appoints our chief of police. So if people vote informed, we may have some ways to change that. It's the only way we're going to change it.
The only thing we're going to do is have to talk about it. We have to ask our viewers who listen to ask your city council people, ask your mayors. This is their year. They will be elected in November. So a lot of times when you go to those forums or you see them on TV shows, people are asking the same old questions, but no one ever asks the hard questions. If you have a police chief, are you going to make them enforce the laws to black and white communities? Are you going to make them stop if you stop black kids and white kids, are you going to search their cars the same? I mean, I think that's what black citizens should be asking. Are you going to train them to deal with mentally ill? Because we always have someone mentally ill in Houston that gets killed unnecessarily. But I see we have another phone call, and we're about to wrap it up. Caller, you're on. Thank you for calling.
Hi there, I'm Vicky Rogers. I listened at your note tonight, and if the niece stayed upstairs, it wouldn't take but 1 second for them to call their niece and say, we have a problem with your uncle down there. Why couldn't they use their common sense to talk to their niece if they got family members on there? It wouldn't take them but a few seconds to get someone in family to get a control of him.
Absolutely.
Well, I agree with you, but usually when it's my experience when police officers see anybody approaching, they tell them to stand back, or I'm going to arrest you for interference with the duties of a police officer.
Absolutely.
So they don't let anybody get close. And part of that is good because someone could come up on them and shoot them. But they should, if it's 6 or 7 officers and 1 female that comes up and say, that's my uncle, he's ill, we bought him a life alert. Because if his kids bought him a life alert, then everybody in his family knows he's ill. And he's and he's disoriented and might have some mental issues.
Yes.
You know, it might not have just been physical, it might have been mental. And we know those ex-Vietnam vets, they are shell-shocked till they die. You know, so you don't know how he was feeling, but the issue was they could have left. They didn't even have to go inside at all and deal with him once that life alert surely called and said he was okay.
Correct.
So I agree with you, ma'am, and I appreciate your call.
Well, you take care of your own self up there.
And
We're doing a good job. I call you every now and then.
I know you do. Thank you. And tell all the young people in your family to make sure they're registered to vote and have valid ID and that they vote because the young people can change things. You know, I know you vote. I know you vote, Miss Vicki. But it's your children and grandchildren and your neighbors' kids that don't vote, and we need to get them out involved, okay? And you educate them like we're trying to do you, okay?
I sure will.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Bye-bye, darling.
All right, bye-bye. We have 3 minutes. Who wants to do some wrap-ups? Let's start with Equator since she hadn't had much to say. So you want to say something before we leave? I'll let everybody say something until he just takes us off the air. But
Well, the thing of it is I wanted to wrap up on the case in dealing with Farrell and the 2 examples that she given as far as Grant and Chamberlain. I really think that it's actually fear, ignorance, lack of training, and maybe some racist ignorance. Instead of just the word ignorance, there's some racist ignorance. Because if that was my case, if these were young white males, the same thing would not happen. Some of the officers they shouldn't be on the force if they have a fear or if they have a racist ignorance. But we have some in Houston that has the same ignorance. We have some in Sugar Land and Fort Bend County that have the same things. So my thing is, how are we going to stop this? When are we going to stop this? Is the police chief, is McCullen able to stop this in Harris County? Nope. Is the sheriff officer, Adrian Garcia? Because there are some officers who's been on their force way before McCullen that he cannot get off. McClellan, way before Adrian Garcia that he cannot get off. That still have those same racist values. The thing of it is when the public starts to change and starts to see this, that's when that change will happen.
I appreciate that. Justin, what are your closing remarks?
Well, I do think that racial ignorance is a big factor in a lot of these, and I was trying to look through my notes to find some of the descriptions that the woman whose door was being knocked on that she gave the police, because it was completely informed by things that kind of invoke stereotypes of young black men. I think she was describing he was muscular and he was large and all these things, and he was pounding on the door. And I think that race informs things a lot more than people want to admit, and mostly than white people want to admit.
Right.
And
white people get mad at black people for telling the truth about it.
Right.
And what frustrates me about the white media, and I'm sorry we're running out of time because we can all come back. What frustrates me is we, as black Americans, we listen to white media all day. I mean, the media is white, okay? And so if you hear Al Sharpton say something, you're pissed off, but he's saying something, because, sometimes and it sounds bad, but you might just get tired of hearing what white people are thinking, because you just have to turn the TV off. And see, that's why so many urban people don't listen to the news. It's like we live in that world, and it's not our world.
Right.
Because you're thinking something bad about me, and I'm not bad.
Right.
I'll hate myself if I listen to what you're saying.
Yeah.
And so I can't listen to that all the time. And so that's why we have to all talk and try to come together and figure out how to live in this world together. But we got to wrap it up now. And we will be back next month and have a roundtable discussion about current events. Thank you all for sacrificing your time.
Thank you.
And trying to educate my 2,000 or 3,000 listeners, and we'll have it on YouTube. And remind people to watch this. And thank you for watching Truth and Justice with Vivian King. Remember, I want to tell your story. The credits will roll, and you'll have my number, or you can always Google me. Call my office. I'm in court all day, but I'll call you back. All right? Thank you. Thank you for tuning in again. Tonight we have something really good, a hot topic in the news this week. He's been charged with crime. This is a show where I try to educate.